This is Weirdly Enough, your regular podcast for strange stories and amazing facts, delivered straight to your favorite podcast directory and at weirdlyenough.com. Now, here are your hosts, Andy and Len.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Weirdly Enough podcast. I'm joined in the studio today by my co-host Len Johnson. How are things going with you, sir?
Never better.
Good, never better. Remember, you can find Weirdly Enough wherever you search for your podcast. Do leave us a review. It really does help. And subscribe so that you never miss an episode of your favourite weird podcast. So today, we're looking at somebody that's very weird. That's Jon Ronson. I've read a few books of Jon's in my time. I've read the, I think the Extremists one and maybe the Men Who Stare Goats. I think I maybe read that at one stage. And also the really good book about So You've Been Publicly Shamed. But we're going to have a look at all of those things, all the things he's done in his career in a little bit more detail. So he was born in Cardiff in 1967. Can you tell us a bit more about Jon Ronson?
Yeah, this is going to be just a straightforward kind of celebration.
Yeah, okay.
It's a bit of a change of pace, so we're, a bit of a lighter kind of topic, Now, he's born on 10th of May 1967 in Cardiff. He's very like Louis Theroux in the sense that he adopts a faux naive persona, and in Jon Ronson's case, it's specifically he'd be like Woody Allen.
Jon Ronson and Louis Theroux had a lot of rivalry, and they kind of, I think, especially Louis kind of resented Ronson in many ways. I'm actually looking it up here, and there's an article in the Belfast Telegraph from June this year about that. He's revealed that he used to reference his former rivalry Louis Theroux in his work, as he did not want to sound like he was beyond reproach. So it's funny you mentioned Louis. I would say, straight out,
to be honest, I'd be Team Ronson.
Yes, yes. Especially, I do like some of the things Louis Theroux produces. I read his Lockdown book, and I got really irritated by it. And in fact, I maybe got the audiobook from Audible, and with Audible you can send it back if you don't like it, even if you've listened to like 90% of it. You can say, I don't like this, I want something else. I very nearly did that with his book. It was just,
Jon Ronson digs a little deeper. Jon Ronson, he's Radio 4, whereas Louis Theroux, he's more Radio 5. To be honest,
it's BBC 2 more than I think.
I would say, to be honest, Louis Theroux's a little bit more populist.
But
anyway, he was born on the 10th of May 1967. Now, he does this faux naive thing, but it's a very specific kind of persona he adopts. He's a bit like Woody Allen.
Yeah.
There's a kind of type you would call a nebbish, which is a sort of, it comes of kind of American kind of Jewish culture.
Yeah.
And it's a sort of kind of geeky kind of, like he described himself as oilish.
Yes. Theroux does the faux naive thing as well, but Theroux, it's kind of, it's almost a little bit, he's doing it, and it's kind of offensive to the people that he's interviewing in a little bit of a way. I'm not slagging him off per se. Yeah.
Now, he's similar in a way because he looks at fringe groups and bizarre subcultures, but it's funny because as Louis Theroux is becoming more populist, and as he goes on, Ronson's kind of focusing on more specifically on things. A fun fact, in the late 80s, Ronson took over from Mark Radcliffe on bass guitar in Frank Sidebottom's band.
I actually forgot about this until you mention it there. There was a 2014 film made, and it was written by Ronson, and it was like Maggie Gyllenhaal and Fassbender. Did Fassbender play?
He plays Frank Sidebottom, yeah.
I think it was made by the Irish and Film 4 and the Irish Film Board. It was made in Ireland, between Ireland and the UK. Very odd film, but Frank Sidebottom was a very, very odd character. A very, very odd persona, perhaps you would want to say. But anyway, we're not looking at Frank today, we're looking at Jon Ronson. He played bass guitar, did you say?
This was, remember Frank Sidebottom and the big papier-mâché head?
Yeah.
I was like, hello, Frank Sidebottom.
But if you watch that film anyway, it was kind of, because when you looked at Frank Sidebottom and the big papier-mâché head, you thought it was like a comedy thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But actually, when you watched, you realised it was like an alter ego and a persona that the guy was trying to put over.
We're back to personas like MK Ultra.
Yes, like last week.
Now, I don't know if you remember this. Do you remember that series For the Love of?
This was in the 90s, was it?
Yeah.
That he did. I'm not quite. Yeah, I don't really remember it, to be honest. I think I remember something like that, but I don't remember watching it. Let's just say that.
It was a great series. It was a series of late night debates in the post pub slot, as was then called, on Channel 4.
There used to be a lot of great stuff in that post pub slot.
Do you remember the Divine David?
No.
The Divine David was an interesting character, but we'll talk about him some other time.
Do you remember that Euro?
Euro trash? That was post pub, yeah.
It was awful.
And The Word was another
The
one.
Word, Terry Christian.
And I remember there was a more kind of, adult kind of version on BBC Two presented by Mark Radcliffe that was specifically about bands called The White Room. That was actually quite good, yeah.
That was good.
And this show investigated people who had an obsession with bizarre topics and subcultures about all different kinds of things.
Right.
John would chair an informal debate, and it's normally 6 people. And he'd make up number 7 as the chair. You can actually find these on the WoW channel on YouTube. Now you probably have to scroll through quite a lot of RuPaul's Drag Race to actually find it, but it's worth checking out. Yeah. Now I just focused on a couple episodes that are quite interesting. One was For the Love of Big Brother.
Right.
And it had different characters called Tim Matthews, for example. He talks about the reality of the MK Ultra program that we covered last week.
So this is Big Brother, as in Big Brother's watching you, rather than the TV
series?
series?
It's like more like Orwellian kind of Big Brother. Now he said he was targeted by security forces who were like monitoring his phone calls. And he says phone calls cut off at random, not when I'm talking to my mum, but when I'm talking to a researcher, it cuts off. And also a strange woman that I found photographing his house. And he also talks about the sinister stockpiles at Porton Down Bio and Chemical Warfare Research Facility.
Scary.
Now, there's another interesting character called Tim Refat, who I wouldn't mind doing a show on because he's quite an interesting, albeit sinister character. He's obsessed with what we call PSI-War, which is psychic scanning. And he alleges that I just noticed, and there's loads of misprints. I'm going to have to be careful not to say the wrong thing of these notes. American and British have been using microwave weapons, and the Russians were always big into psychic attacks.
Right, okay.
And the Russians and Americans found that at the flick of a switch you could control human behaviour.
It's very much like our MK Ultra episode that we talked about last week.
Very much so. He showed the panel a frequency monitor, because that's one thing I've noticed about this show is people are always producing different bits and bobs of interest. So he showed the panel what he calls a frequency monitor. He says that MI5 will break into your house and plant bugs around the house and in your clothes, etc. when you're out, and these can be used to track the target round and bombard the target with microwaves. He says he's a top target of the security services.
Right.
And he also says he lives in Brighton, which he believes is a hotbed of all these shenanigans in Britain, apparently. And he says he has his mail interfered with. He talks about the best way to remote view, and in his view, you need to combine the Bulgarian method and the American method of remote viewing.
And what are these?
Well, basically, you need to sit down in a comfortable armchair in a darkened room, very quiet. You need to empty your mind. And the Bulgarians found that listening to Baroque classical music, was best to kind of get your mind into the right state. And the American method is to doodle your impressions on a sheet of paper. So you need to have a good sort of mixture of those things. And there's another guy called John Beveridge. He talked about very sinister experiments involving British submarines and rabbits, where it was about kind of grim. It was about Watership Down, actually, where allegedly they had like a mother rabbit,
right,
and they take the wee baby rabbits off her and take them into a submarine. And it's kind of a bit horrible, actually. Allegedly they went down the submarine like to the bottom of the sea and like killed the wee rabbits, and then like monitored her like reactions and that.
Right.
So and yeah, apparently she was reacting when the winds were.
She was up above.
She was up above, yeah. It's funny.
I love that name, John. I'm John
Beveridge. John Beveridge is a funny character because I've watched this episode and then tried to research, and he doesn't say much.
Right.
And in fact, at one point, I think is it Jon Ronson says to John Beveridge, "You're not saying much, John. You're not saying much." And John's just sort of staring, and he said, "I'm just taking it all in." And then he chips in with this kind of sinister story about the robots. Who else is there? Yes, Ivan Fraser, poor old Ivan Fraser.
What happened to Ivan Fraser?
Who the comments felt quite sorry for because they all kind of gang up on him a wee bit.
Right.
Now his whole thing is to identify who the sacred unknowns are, because John's asking him, is it MI5, MI6, and it's quite interesting because he gets into the power pyramid. He's a bit like David Icke, and in Ivan's view, the Cold War rivalry is just a smokescreen. And it's about divide and conquer.
Right.
And he says them are of all nationalities. Now, Jon Ronson actually went on to do a thing called Them, Adventures with Extremists.
Yeah.
And the title is kind of quite clever because it's a double meaning. Because in the world of Jon Ronson and people writing it, them are the extremists. But in the world of the extremists, them are the sacred unknowns. So the title of Them, if you've ever read it, is actually quite an interesting kind of play on words. Okay. He goes into the Princess Diana conspiracy, and it's actually quite interesting. Now, one of the points that he makes is the whole feminine principle, the divine feminine, which he reckons has been suppressed by the sacred unknowns throughout history. And he says this feminine knowledge can be used for psychic healing. Now, it gets a bit of an argy-bargy because your man Tim Matthews just randomly cuts into everybody and he talks over people and he goes off in tangents, and Ivan and some of the commenters in the channel think he's a plant.
Okay.
Because, and it's actually quite interesting because Tim Matthews is a funny character. There's a lot of conspiracy theories about Tim Matthews.
Right.
Because he crops up in weird places. Like, he'll crop up on, like, documentaries where he's infiltrated the far right.
Yeah.
And also the Green Movement, and also he was big in UFO circles for a long time, and he pops up here. And yeah, it's kind of an interesting one. Like,
what other For the Love of episodes are there then?
There's tons of them. Now,
and these are kind of like talk shows where they just sit around and chat about
it's
these
a
things.
format that was very popular in the 80s and 90s in British TV.
Yeah.
It's a sort of late night. I mean, there's great late night discussion. I can't remember the name of the show, but there was quite a heavy one that used to be on channel BBC Two. It was the famous one where Oliver Reed is blocked and he goes off in one. But it's a format that you used to say all the time.
Yeah.
Now, there's other episodes, too many to go into. Some are stranger than others.
Okay.
There's one for the love of celibacy, for the love of models, for the love of politeness.
Right.
And now the other one I want to have a quick look at is for the love of time travel.
Yeah.
And in the introduction, Ronson says that time travel is the most paradoxical of all the great enigmas.
Okay.
And there's a number of guests, such as the lovely Tony Bassett, who's a great character. Now, he built his own time machine in the shed.
Oh, very good.
How
does that work?
It uses a natural sort of energy as would be produced in a thunderstorm.
Right.
It's a box, and Tony actually brings on the box to the studio.
And does it work?
What Tony reckon it does, he says if you sit next to it when it's switched, you can transport the user to another time, but he changes the story because at the start he gives the impression that it actually brings you back to another time, but then as we go on, it's like he's kind of changing it away, but he says, it brings your consciousness back, and your consciousness sort of occupies another person. Now, he has quite a... because he wants to investigate the story of Cynthia Gisby. He's one of the other guests. Now, Cynthia recounts a very strange visit to a mysterious hotel in rural France. Her husband, Len, and their friends had a very pleasant meal of egg and chips in this place.
In France?
Yes, and they were tended to by an old lady in a long gown.
Yeah.
And it had very archaic furniture in this hotel, and a surprisingly cheap bill of 19 francs for the whole night, bed and board and egg and chips. When leaving the hotel, they asked for directions to the motorway from a passing gendarme, who was very confused by the question.
Right.
Now, they put it down to the fact that we don't speak French.
Yes.
So they thought it was like a linguistic confusion. Now, whenever they came back, they tried to visit the hotel again, but couldn't find it. And trees had grown to 40 feet high during their 2 weeks they'd been off in another part of France. And also they took photographs when they were there, and they went to go and check them, and they disappeared from the camera.
So maybe it was time travel then.
So Sanfia the most obvious explanation that they travelled back in time. So basically they're asking Tony Bassett, can they verify Sanfia's story? But basically it turns out that you kind of have to be in the right mood to kind of travel through time. Tony says that his machine relaxes the mind and enables the mind to be in two places at once. You don't physically travel through time, it's more a case of occupying the consciousness of another person. Discussion moves on to the National Lottery, and Tony says that the board of Camelot are aware of the danger of time travellers and psychics, so they've taken steps to guard against this. He doesn't specify what the steps are, but he assures us, in case you're worried about that, because Jon Ronson brings it up as a bit of a concern.
Well, let's go on and look at other things that Jon Ronson has produced then. Adventures with Extremists in the early noughties, I believe it was 2001.
Yeah, it was a companion to a documentary, and the documentary is actually quite interesting because there's a couple of strands in the documentary. He follows David Icke on a book tour around Canada.
Okay.
And he also interviews a group that's protesting Icke's visit. He follows Alex Jones, the infamous, famous Alex Jones, as he attempts to infiltrate a meeting of international business leaders and politicians at the Bohemian Grove retreat.
I remember all Bohemian Grove. You used to always hear about Bohemian Grove.
It would be worth a podcast episode, I think. Now, Jones believes the retreat is merely a cover for the occult rites of secret societies, and there's some quite creepy footage that's actually featured of the attendees dressed in robes and gathering at the foot of a giant stone owl, in which they call the cremation of care ceremony, which is kind of quite freaky. And he also teams up with a guy called Big Jim Tucker, who's been investigating the secret of Bilderberg Group in their meetings since the 70s. And he actually accompanies Big Jim to a meeting in Portugal, I believe, and it actually takes a sinister turn because him and Big Jim get chased by these mysterious guys in suits. You mentioned the men who stare in ghosts, which is actually really interesting. It's a look at the 1st Irish Battalion, which was a secret news unit in the US Army, and they were into using paranormal phenomena like remote viewing and secret spying. And there was a guy called Albert Stubblebine, who was a Major General, and he was big into levitation, spoon bending, and the art of walking through walls. He believed you could actually walk through walls. Now it's worth. There's a wee PDF you can actually download, and it was like a manual an official manual that they used, and it's pretty crazy stuff. Now the book examines the link between these ideas and possible use of some of the more realistic techniques. For example, if you remember the Waco siege of the Branch Davidians and David Koresh, there was lots of use of kind of loud rock music that was blasted at them for days on end to kind of mess with their minds and stuff like that. Now there's a scary one as well. Apparently in Guantanamo, one of the methods that they used to kind of torture people was to play the I Love You song from Barney the Dinosaur for days on end. It's like, I love you, you love me, da 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 da. It's really irritating.
Keeps repeating.
It's just really irritating, now he interviewed Stephen Halpern, who was a New Age musician who consulted the army on how to embed subliminal messages in the music. And it's definitely worth getting the PDF of the manual. And it covers topics such as new approaches to personal development in harmony with planetary evolution. And the book was turned into a very good film that starred George Clooney. And I think Ian McGregor, he didn't play Jon Ronson, he played like a Jon Ronson kind of stand-on kind of type,
it's a very good book. I remember reading it in the film. Not too bad either. And then we move on to So You've Been Publicly Shamed.
That's what I'm worried about, that will be publicly shamed.
I know, it's very, very interesting book. It looks at a few different cases, but you want to tell us a bit more?
Yeah, to be honest, I mean, this book came out in 2015, but it's probably more relevant now than it's ever been.
It's a book real cancel culture stuff, isn't it?
It's a book that becomes more relevant, over time, because this is the whole thing. I mean, with smartphones and social media, This is just a war that just dominates everything, like, you know. Now, it starts off in an interesting story of how Ronson was trolled by a spam bot in 2012 on Twitter.
Right.
And what happened was these guys from the University of Warwick set up like a spam version, or like a bot version of Jon Ronson.
Yeah.
It started kind of, there's quite rude stuff outside, and Ronson started to get really annoyed and he got in this whole debate with those guys and set up a meeting, and it turned very acrimonious. And the weird thing is, the confrontation was put on YouTube and on Jon Ronson's social media, and then Jon Ronson's followers started to pile in on these guys and kind of like bully them.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting sort of thing about the dynamics of that, like, you know. Let's see. And yeah, he looks at a few cases. There's one case, like a pop psychology author called Jonah Leher, who faked inspirational quotes from Bob Dylan and basically sort of destroyed his career.
Right.
And there's an interesting one, Justine Sacco, in 2013. She was one of the early examples on Twitter, and she posted misjudged comments about AIDS in Africa to her. She only had 170 followers, so she was very small scale. But she started trending with hashtag has Justine landed yet, because she sent a tweet before she left for Cape Town.
Yeah.
And between her taking off from Heathrow and arriving in Cape Town, it just exploded on the internet.
On her phone,
and it was like the pylon of all pylons. It was insane. Now, in November 2013, her name was googled 30 times. In the 11 days between 20th of December and the end of December, she was googled over 1 million times.
Jeez.
So it just shows you how that just exploded out of nowhere. A man was actually waiting for her at Cape Town Airport. He was a Twitter user called @Zach_R. He took her photograph and posted it online. Yup, @Justine Sacco has in fact landed at Cape Town International. She decided to wear sunnies as a disguise. I'm assuming that's like sunglasses.
Yeah.
And that was 3 weeks after she said the initial tweet, you know. And then the mainstream press came under and started, because it's a thing that it's like archaeology, offence archaeology, where they start digging through your past, and they dug out various sort of dodgy things that she said in the past, you know. So it's kind of interesting that way. But there was a kind of a heartwarming story as well. If you remember Max Mosley, Max Mosley was it was an F1 boss, and he actually made legal history. Because he won £60,000 in damages against the News of the World in a privacy case that hinged on the fame of an orgy that he held with 5 hookers in a West London dungeon.
Right.
And the point, cause he's held up as an interesting case by Jon Ronson, because Jon Ronson says his approach was just not to be file shame, but to say, well, I do this, what of it? But the whole thing at the time was, it's a Nazi orgy. Right. But then he legally says, it's an orgy, but just not a Nazi one. Yeah. And on a point of legal kind of fact, he won his damages, like, you know. And in fact, the guys in the News of the World nearly got jailed over, you know, like libel and stuff, like, you know. Now, to finish off, there's a guy called Brad Blanton.
Okay.
Now his take is radical honesty. That's his approach, you know. Yeah. So he runs like a shame eradication workshop, and he charges $500 per session to like eradicate shame.
Good work if you can get it.
And his theory is we should toss out the filters between our brains and our mouths, and if you think it, say it. So he says, confess to your boss your secret plans to start your own company. If you're having fantasies about your wife's sister, he says to tell your wife and tell her sister. It's the only path to an authentic relationship. It's the only way to smash through modernity's soul deadening alienation.
Fair enough.
So that's his sort of taking things, but anyway, we could go on, but it's an interesting, you know, hopefully his career isn't over, because he's a very interesting guy, Jon Ronson.
He is. I think he lives out in the States now, doesn't he? Yeah. Sorry, I'm changing the mood lighting in our little studio here. Look at that, that's
kind of freak. It's like a disco here.
Yeah. We can change it to blue, red. I like the green. I thought it was quite soothing, quite, I don't know.
Green and blue, the best. Sort of calming colours.
But blue light, you don't get to sleep with blue light, so just watch it if you say it's night light. Anyway, thank you very much for listening. We'll be back with, weirdly enough, Weird Shorts very, very soon. So if you've ever listened to the national UK traffic news, you may be familiar with the Scottish village of Cockbridge. You always hear Cockbridge to Tomintal, an area made famous by this by the late Sir Terry Wogan. Road signs in the village are a target for stickers with lots of different labels stuck on the signs, but they're also a target for sign thieves and souvenir hunters. So much so that Aberdeenshire Council has found a way to make the signs tamper-proof. A spokesman said, "We are aware of the issue with the signs and are working to replace using more robust tamper-proof fixings. The road is one of the highest in the UK and often disappears in heavy snow, so it's frequently closed during the winter, thus attracting attention from traffic news, and presumably that's when old Wogan got enamoured with the name Cockbridge. Other signs in the local area that also get targeted are signs for the village, a village called Lost, and their signs are often getting lost."
That's ironic. It's the definition of irony.
Yeah. This one I liked. A famous artwork painted in 1941 by Dutch abstract artist Pierre Mondrian called New York City has been found to have been hanging upside down at New York's Museum of Modern Art for the past 75 years. What? So they've had it. But if you look at it, it's coloured tape. The artwork features bright coloured lines made with coloured tape on a white background. So really, all it is just bits of like electrical tape.
I was gonna say, how did it get upside down? Like,
yeah, I don't think it matters that much. Art historian Suzanne Mayer-Busner told the Guardian that the tape is now so fragile in the artwork that to turn it the right way up would probably damage the piece. She discovered the error while researching a show for the Dusseldorf art collection. A photograph of Mondrian's studio taken just a few days after his death showed the work sitting on an easel the right way up. Though I'm kind of wondering, was it the right way up? Maybe he turned it around, who knows. Mondrian, who is considered one of the greatest artists of the last century, signed the artwork, so this should have given the gallery a clear indication of how the piece should have been hung. And this is going back to Halloween now. We do love those people marrying weird things on Weirdly Enough, and this has come up before. A woman marrying a ghost. A singer from Oxfordshire who calls herself Brocard, Brocard, was first introduced to her new husband when Eduardo, who dresses as a Victorian soldier, made an appearance in her home last year. Apparently Eduardo burst into her bedroom in the dead of night when they first met last year, and he communicates by putting sensations through her body.
Right.
She married the ghost on Halloween, of course she did, but she had a few problems with the logistics of the arrangements. She talked to Holly and Phil on ITV
as you
morning. During the queue, I think she talked to them, saying that she found it incredibly difficult to find a church that would allow the wedding to take place. She said, "I think there's a bit of an issue with religion and the afterlife." She's been kicked out of churches and even threatened with exorcisms when looking for a suitable venue. She had envisaged a huge white wedding with all her friends and family in attendance, but was worried a lot of people couldn't see the vision. I can't see your husband, love. Further in the interview, Brickhead stopped and said, "He's here," stating that the ghost was in the TV studio. Philip Schofield was quick to quip, "I should hope so. It's your wedding day." So a good old pep there. And it's that time of year again to think about what calendars will adorn your wall for the year 2023. You might be interested in a calendar produced by Britain's self-confessed dullest man, a man called Kevin Beersford, who has spent months travelling the length and breadth of Britain reviewing and photographing car parks. Kevin has picked his 12 favourite car parks for what could be the most boring calendar of 2023. Britain's most haunted car park at Culloden, Scotland, features on the Marchpay, the site of Britain's last battle in 1746. Asked to choose a favourite, Kevin opted for the Trinity Street car park in Birmingham's Creative Quarter, which boasts a cocktail bar along one of the sides.
Right.
So the car park, I think it just neighbours a cocktail bar. I don't think the car park actually is a cocktail bar. President of the Car Park Association, Kevin, says that he takes many factors into account when choosing the best car park, including lighting, price and aesthetics of the space. He said, "I think first and foremost, if I had to design a car park myself, it would have to be brightly lit." He likes his lights, does old Kevin.
I think that Culloden one's quite interesting though. That's one settled, but they boring.
I think it's just a car park.
It's an interesting location, though.
I went to a car park at the, what do you call those big cliffs out in Galway? Those big cliffs anyway. Yeah. And we drove in.
Yeah.
How much? Total tourist trap.
Aye.
This is €10 person. I thought that was to get into the cliffs as well. It was free to get into the cliffs. Of course it's free to get into the cliffs. This was just some chancer who had a car park near it. £10 a person. So if I dropped all the people that were with me, I would have got it for €10. I would have got it for €10. Tourist trap.
Don't publicly shame us, by the way, for slagging off tourist traps, but
well, you can if you want. Okay, well, thanks very much for listening. We'll be back again very, very soon with a new podcast on Weirdly Enough. Remember, do subscribe wherever you get your podcast. You can find us on YouTube, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter. Do look for us there. Thanks again.
Thanks for listening to Weirdly Enough. Remember to subscribe to get the latest edition as soon as it drops. And don't forget to leave a review. Email us about anything we've discussed or with your own weird tale at podcast@weirdlyenough.com.